The first thing Jake Morrison heard was not silence. It was the sound of metal groaning under pressure, and voices speaking in languages he did not know. His eyes opened slowly, and the world came into focus like looking through dirty water. The cryopod's lid was already open, cold air rushing over his skin. Jake tried to sit up, but his muscles felt like rubber. 300 years of sleep had left his body weak and confused. He could see other pods around him, their blue lights flickering in the darkness. Some were open, others remained sealed. The emergency lights cast long shadows across the room. Jake, are you awake? The voice belonged to Lisa Carter. She was sitting on the edge of her own pod, holding her head in her hands. Her dark hair had grown longer during the sleep, and her face looked pale in the dim light. I think so, Jake said, his voice coming out as a whisper. How long? I don't know. The computer systems are showing numbers. I don't understand. Lisa stood up on shaky legs and walked to a wall panel. The screen was filled with alien symbols mixed with human text. 300 years, maybe more. Jake forced himself to stand. His legs almost gave out, but he held onto the pod for support. Around the room, other pods were opening. Rick Hayes climbed out of his pod, looking angry and confused. Danny Price was already trying to work on a broken computer terminal. Amy Torres sat quietly, staring at nothing. The room they were in was not the same as when they went to sleep. The walls were covered with strange metal patches, and new equipment had been installed. Cables ran along the ceiling in patterns that made no sense. The air smelled different too, like ozone and something organic. Where are we? Rick asked, walking over to join them. His military training was already kicking in, and Jake could see him looking for weapons and exits. Same station, Danny called from across the room. But someone has been here. Look at this stuff. He pointed to the new equipment. This isn't human technology. A door that Jake did not remember being there opened with a soft hiss. 3 figures walked in, and Jake's hand moved to where his sidearm used to be. The figures were not human. They were tall and thin, with gray skin and large eyes. They wore suits that seemed to be made of living metal. One of them stepped forward and spoke. The words came out as clicks and whistles, but a small device on its chest translated the sounds into English. You are awake. This is good. We have waited long for this moment. Jake looked at the others. Lisa had moved closer to him, while Rick was positioning himself between the aliens and the rest of the group. Amy had found a piece of metal pipe and was holding it like a weapon. Who are you? Jake asked. What happened to Earth? The alien's large eyes seemed to show sadness, though Jake was not sure if he was reading the expression correctly. Earth is gone. Your species scattered to the outer worlds 50 years after you began your sleep. The Hegemony Alliance conquered your homeworld. The words hit Jake like a physical blow. Earth was gone. Humanity was scattered. Everything they had fought for was lost. Why did you wake us up? Lisa asked, her scientific mind already working on the problem. Because the galaxy faces a threat that requires your specific talents, the alien said. We are called the Liberation Front. We represent 47 species that refuse to bow to the Void Dominion. Jake had never heard of the Void Dominion, but the name sounded ominous. What kind of threat? The alien touched a control on its suit, and the room's walls became transparent screens showing images from space. Jake saw planets that looked like they had been drained of life. Entire star systems were dark and empty. Ships the size of moons moved through space, leaving nothing behind. The Void Dominion consumes life itself, the alien explained. They feed on the energy of living beings, leaving dead worlds behind. In the past 50 years, they have consumed 1,200 inhabited planets. Our combined fleets cannot stop them. Danny whistled low. That's impossible. No species could be that powerful. They are not just powerful, the alien said. They are growing stronger with each world they consume. Traditional warfare is useless against them. They adapt to every strategy, counter every weapon. We need something they cannot predict or understand. Rick crossed his arms. And you think humans are the answer? The alien's expression changed in a way that might have been fear. The old records speak of your species. You did not fight wars the way others fight wars. You fought to win, regardless of cost or honor. The major powers of the galaxy agreed to never wait you again because you were too dangerous. Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold air. Too dangerous how? You turned enemies against themselves. You used their own psychology as a weapon. You made warfare into an art of breaking minds as well as bodies. The Korthic warriors, who live only for battle, demanded that humanity be contained rather than destroyed because they feared what you might teach their young. Amy finally spoke up. You're talking about us like we're monsters. Perhaps you are, the alien said simply. But now the galaxy needs monsters. The Void Dominion cannot be reasoned with or negotiated with. They must be stopped by any means necessary. You are the only species that truly understands what that phrase means. Jake looked around at his team. These were good people, scientists and soldiers, who had volunteered for a mission to study alien life and establish peaceful contact. Now, they were being told they were the galaxy's last hope against an enemy that consumed entire worlds. Show us more about this Void Dominion, Jake said. The alien nodded and changed the images on the walls. Jake saw creatures that looked like they were made of shadow and hunger. They moved in perfect coordination, like parts of a single organism. When they attacked a planet, they did not use weapons in any traditional sense. They simply touched living things and drained them dry. They are a hive mind, the alien explained. Each individual is connected to all others. They share knowledge and experience instantly. This makes them impossible to surprise or outmaneuver. Every battle teaches them about their enemies. Lisa studied the images with scientific interest. How do they reproduce? How do they spread? They convert the life force they consume into new members of their species. Every planet they drain adds millions to their numbers. At their current rate of expansion, they will reach the core worlds within 20 years. Jake did the math in his head. Billions of lives lost every year, with the rate of destruction increasing. The scale of the threat was beyond anything humanity had ever faced. What makes you think we can stop them? Jake asked. The alien was quiet for a moment. Then it said, because in all our records of galactic warfare, only humans ever fought a battle they were expected to lose and found a way to win anyway. Only humans ever looked at an impossible situation and made it possible through pure stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Rick snorted. You're asking us to save a galaxy that forgot about us. Yes, the alien said. We are asking you to become the monsters you are always capable of being, in service of species that fear you, to defeat an enemy that cannot be defeated by any honorable means. Jake looked at his team again. They were all looking at him, waiting for his decision. He thought about Earth, gone forever. He thought about humanity, scattered and forgotten. He thought about billions of innocent lives facing extinction. How long do we have to decide? Jake asked. The Void Dominion will reach the next inhabited system in 6 days, the alien replied. After that, their numbers will double again. Jake nodded slowly. The choice was no choice at all. Humanity would do what it had always done when faced with impossible odds. They would find a way to win, no matter what it cost or who they had to become. Wake up the others, Jake said. We have work to do. Danny Price worked on the station's old computer systems for 6 hours before he finally broke through the security locks. The main databank had been sealed and hidden, buried under layers of alien code that had been added over the centuries. When the screens finally came to life, Everyone gathered around to see what 300 years of galactic history looked like. "Start with the contact wars," Jake said. "I want to know what really happened after we went under." Danny's fingers moved across the keyboard, pulling up files that had been marked as classified by a dozen different species. The first video that played showed human soldiers boarding an alien ship. Jake recognized the uniforms from his own time, but what he saw the soldiers doing made his stomach turn. The humans were not just fighting the alien crew. They were setting up what looked like a torture chamber in the ship's main hull. They had captured several aliens alive and were doing things to them that Jake did not want to watch. But the worst part was the recording equipment. The humans were filming everything. "Turn it off," Amy said, looking sick. "No," Jake said quietly. "We need to see this." The video showed the human soldiers releasing one of the tortured aliens. They gave him a small recording device and sent him back to his own fleet. The alien was broken, shaking, unable to speak properly. But the recording device worked perfectly. Lisa read the tactical report that came with the video. It says here that within 48 hours, the entire alien fleet surrendered without firing another shot. The recording had been broadcast to every ship. Rick was staring at the screen with a strange expression. Psychological warfare. Break their will to fight before the battle even starts. Danny pulled up more files. The pattern was always the same. Human forces would capture a few enemy soldiers, do horrible things to them, then send them back with evidence of what had happened. Sometimes the humans would take over enemy communication systems and broadcast the torture live to entire fleets. "This is sick," Amy said. "We're not like this." But Jake was not so sure. He remembered the desperation of those early days when humanity was facing extinction from multiple alien species at once. Every human colony was under attack. Millions were dying. The choice had been to fight dirty or to die clean. "Look at this one," Lisa said, pointing to another file. "Battle of Kepler Station." The report showed how human forces had captured an enemy command ship. Instead of destroying it, they had used the ship's own weapons to attack other enemy vessels. But they had done it badly on purpose, making it look like the command ship had gone insane and was firing randomly at its own fleet. The enemy species was highly organized and trusted their commanders completely. When they saw their command ship attacking them, they did not know what to do. Some ships fired back. Others tried to help. The entire fleet fell apart in confusion, while human forces picked them off one by one. "Clever," Rick admitted. "Turn their strength into a weakness." Danny found more files about human tactics. There were reports of humans faking surrender, then detonating hidden bombs when enemy forces came to accept it. Stories of humans who would pretend to be refugees, then poison water supplies on enemy worlds. Records of human soldiers who would fight until they were nearly dead, then activate hidden recorders to broadcast their final moments across enemy networks. They made martyrs of themselves, Jake realized, but not for glory, for psychological impact. One report from an alien commander caught Jake's attention. It had been translated into human languages and marked as important. The alien wrote, "Humans do not fight to win battles. They fight to win wars. They do not care about honor or proper conduct. They care only about making their enemies stop fighting. They turn warfare into a form of mental poison that spreads through our ranks faster than any weapon." Amy was reading over his shoulder. "That's not warfare. That's terrorism." "What's the difference?" Rick asked. "When your entire species is about to be wiped out?" Lisa found the biological warfare reports next. These were the hardest to read. Humans had not just used diseases as weapons. They had designed viruses specifically to cause fear and panic. Some would make enemy soldiers see hallucinations of dead friends. Others would cause uncontrollable pain without actually damaging the body. The psychological impact was always more important than the physical damage. Jake read from one report. Human biological weapons were designed to create stories that would spread through enemy populations. Danny pulled up casualty reports from the contact wars. The numbers were strange. Human forces had killed relatively few enemy soldiers in direct combat, but enemy suicide rates had gone through the roof. Desertion became common among species that had never experienced it before. Entire fleets would retreat from battles they could have won, just because they were facing humans. "We broke them," Jake said quietly. "We didn't just defeat them. We made them afraid to fight us." The reports from other species made it clear what the galaxy thought of humanity's methods. The Korthic Empire, famous for their warrior culture, had filed an official complaint about human tactics. They said humans were corrupting the nature of warfare itself and making it impossible for honorable species to fight properly. The Hegemony Alliance had tried to create rules for fighting. Humans. No single ship was allowed to engage human forces alone. All communications had to be monitored for psychological warfare attempts. Captured humans were to be executed immediately rather than interrogated, because they were too dangerous to keep alive. "They were scared of us," Amy said, sounding surprised. "More than scared," Lisa corrected, reading another report. "They were terrified. Look at this treaty document." The Treaty of Centauri Prime was signed by 47 different species. It was an agreement to never wake humanity from cryosleep once the contact wars ended. Every major power in the galaxy had signed it. The document called humans an existential threat to civilized warfare and declared that human methods could undermine the social structure of any species exposed to them. Rick laughed, but it was not a happy sound. They were afraid we'd teach their own people how to fight like us. Jake found the final report in the databank. It was written by a human general named Peterson right before the surrender. The document was addressed to future generations of humanity in case they ever woke up. "We did what we had to do," Peterson had written. "The galaxy wanted to wipe us out, so we became something they could not wipe out. We became their nightmare. Every species that fought us learned to fear us more than death. In the end, they let us live, because destroying us seemed less dangerous than what we might become if we had nothing left to lose." The report continued. "But we paid a price for survival. We became the monsters they said we were. Future generations must decide if that price was worth paying. The galaxy will never trust us again. They will never see us as equals. We are the weapon they keep locked away, to be used only when all else fails." Danny closed the files and leaned back in his chair. "So that's what we are, the galaxy's weapon of last resort." "That's what we were," Jake corrected. "The question is what we are now." Lisa was looking at new files that had appeared on the screen. These were about the Void Dominion. The images showed the same consuming creatures they had seen before, but now Jake could see the tactical reports from various species that had tried to fight them. Every conventional strategy had failed. The Dominion adapted to energy weapons. Within hours, they learned to counter kinetic weapons in days. When faced with nuclear attacks, they simply absorbed the radiation and used it to grow stronger. "Nothing works against them," Amy said, reading over the reports. "Nothing conventional." Rick corrected. "But humans never fought conventional wars." Jake studied the information about the Void Dominion's hive mind structure. They shared all knowledge instantly. They coordinated perfectly. They never made the same mistake twice. But that perfection might also be their weakness. They expect logical responses, Jake realized. They adapt to rational strategies. But humans never fought rationally. Danny pulled up more files about human psychological warfare techniques. Suddenly, the methods that had seemed so horrible before looked different. The Void Dominion was a hive mind that consumed entire planets. Normal weapons could not hurt them. But humans had always specialized in breaking minds. "We can't fight." "Their bodies," Lisa said, understanding what Jake was thinking. "But maybe we can fight their minds." Rick was nodding slowly. "Turn their perfection against them. Make them doubt themselves." Amy looked sick again. "You're talking about using torture and terrorism against an entire species." "No," Jake said. "We're talking about survival. The Void Dominion doesn't negotiate. They don't retreat. They don't show mercy. They consume everything living in the galaxy and turn it into more of themselves." He looked around at his team. 300 years ago, we became monsters to save humanity. Now we need to decide if we're willing to become monsters again to save everyone else." The alien who had woken them up appeared in the doorway. Jake had not heard him approach. "Have you learned enough about your past?" the alien asked. "Yes," Jake said. "Now show us everything you know about the Void Dominion. If we're going to fight them, we need to understand exactly how their minds work." The alien's large eyes showed what might have been relief. "You will help us?" Ben Walsh stood in front of 50 alien soldiers and tried to explain something that should not need explaining. The Liberation Front's best warriors sat in neat rows, their various species represented by different shapes, sizes, and skin colors. They all had one thing in common, though. They looked confused. "War is not about honor," Ben said for the third time. "War is about making the other side stop fighting. Everything else is just decoration." A Korthic warrior raised his clawed hand. These aliens were famous throughout the galaxy for their fighting skills. Their entire culture was built around combat. But how do we maintain our warrior spirit if we do not fight with honor? Ben wanted to laugh, but he knew that would not help. Your warrior spirit won't matter if you're dead. The Void Dominion doesn't care about your honor. They just want to eat you. Another alien spoke up. This one was from a species that looked like walking trees. "In our culture, we announce our attacks before we begin. It gives the enemy a chance to prepare. This makes victory more meaningful." "That's nice," Ben said. "It also makes victory less likely. The Void Dominion will use your announcement to set up an ambush. Then they'll consume your entire fleet while you're trying to be polite." The alien soldiers looked at each other with expressions that Ben was learning to read as worry. These species had been fighting wars for thousands of years, but they had always fought by rules. Even when they hated each other, they followed certain customs about how battles should work. "Let me show you something," Ben said. He activated a holographic display that showed a simple battle scenario. "You have 10 ships. The enemy has 10 ships. Your ships are stronger. How do you win?" The Korthic warrior answered immediately. "We challenge them to single combat. Ship against ship. The strongest survive." "Wrong," Ben said. "You lose because while you're fighting fair, they call for backup. Now it's 10 against 20, and your honor gets you killed." He changed the display to show the human approach. "Here's what humans would do. We announce that we want to surrender. When they come close to accept our surrender, we blow up our weakest ship and take out half their fleet. Then we hunt down the survivors one by one." The silence in the room was uncomfortable. Several aliens were making gestures that Ben had learned meant they were praying or asking for forgiveness. "That is dishonorable," the tree-like alien said. "Yes," Ben agreed. "It's also effective. And when your entire species is facing extinction, effective matters more than honorable." While Ben was trying to teach aliens how to fight dirty, Jake was working on strategy with the Liberation Front's leaders. The main planning room was filled with holographic displays showing Void Dominion movements across the galaxy. The scale of their expansion was terrifying. "They consume an average of 3 planets per week," the alien commander explained. Each planet they drain adds approximately 50 million new Dominion units to their forces. Jake studied the patterns of attack. The Void Dominion was methodical and efficient. They hit the most populated worlds first, then worked outward to smaller colonies. They never attacked random targets or wasted time on planets with small populations. They're too organized, Jake said. Look at this. Perfect coordination across hundreds of star systems. No mistakes, no confusion, no hesitation. Lisa was working at another station, studying biological samples that the Liberation Front had managed to collect from Dominion creatures. The hive-mind connection is stronger than we thought, she said. Each individual unit shares not just information, but actual experiences. When one learns something, they all learn it instantly. Rick joined them at the main display. So we can't surprise them. We can't use the same trick twice. Every battle teaches them how to fight us better. Exactly, Jake said. Which means we need to fight them in a way that gets worse for them the more they learn about it. The alien commander looked confused. How is that possible? Jake smiled, but it was not a nice smile. We teach them to be afraid. Fear is something they've never experienced before. It's a weakness they don't know how to handle. Danny had been working with Liberation Front scientists to understand Void Dominion technology. The results were both impressive and horrifying. They don't use tools the way we do, he explained to the group. Their technology is grown, not built. It's all biological, connected to their hive mind. Which means, Jake asked, which means if we can poison their thoughts, we might be able to poison their technology too, Danny said. Everything they have is connected to their mental network. Lisa looked up from her biological samples. I've been thinking about that. What if we could create a virus that doesn't attack their bodies, but attacks their ability to share thoughts? The alien commander made a gesture of confusion. How would such a virus work? By forcing them to become individuals, Lisa explained. The Void Dominion has never experienced independent thought. Each creature has always been part of the whole. If we could break those connections, even temporarily, they would be lost and confused. Jake saw the potential immediately. A species that has never been alone suddenly finds itself cut off from the hive. They wouldn't know how to function. More than that, Rick added, they would experience fear for the first time, doubt, uncertainty, all the emotions that individual beings have to deal with. Amy had been quiet during most of the planning, but now she spoke up. This is psychological warfare on a scale we've never attempted before. We're talking about changing the fundamental nature of an entire species. Yes, Jake said simply, because that's what it's going to take. The Liberation Front leaders were starting to understand what they had asked for. The alien commander was reading human tactical manuals, and his expression was getting more worried with each page. These strategies, the commander said, they involve sacrificing your own people as weapons. Sometimes, Jake agreed. War is about acceptable losses. The question is whether losing a few thousand people to save a few billion is acceptable. Another alien leader joined the conversation. This one was from a species that looked like giant insects. In your records, you speak of using civilian populations as bait. You would sacrifice innocents to achieve victory? Jake looked around the room, at all the alien faces staring at him. Let me ask you something. The Void Dominion is going to kill everyone in this galaxy if we don't stop them. Every man, woman, and child on every planet. Total extinction. Now, if sacrificing one city could save 100 worlds, would you do it? The aliens were quiet. Jake could see them struggling with the question. The problem with the way you fight wars, Jake continued, is that you think there's a clean way to do it. You think you can save everyone and defeat your enemies without getting your hands dirty. But sometimes the choice isn't between good and evil. Sometimes it's between terrible and extinction. Rick was setting up training scenarios for liberation. Front Special Forces. These were the elite soldiers from various species, the best fighters the galaxy had to offer. Rick was teaching them how to think like humans. Forget everything you know about tactics, Rick told them. Humans don't fight battles. We fight minds. Our goal is not to destroy enemy forces. Our goal is to make them destroy themselves. He showed them footage from the contact wars, focusing on the psychological aspects. Watch this. Human forces are outnumbered 10-1. Instead of fighting, they surrender. The enemy thinks they've won. But the humans had hidden recorders on their ships. When the enemy executes the prisoners, the recordings are broadcast across the galaxy. The alien soldiers watched as entire enemy fleets began deserting after seeing the executions. Species that had been allied with the executioners started switching sides. The victory turned into a public relations disaster that cost the enemy more than any military defeat. You turned surrender into a weapon, one of the aliens said. We turned everything into a weapon, Rick corrected. Mercy, cruelty, fear, hope, honor, dishonor. Humans learned that in war, everything can be used against your enemy if you're creative enough. Meanwhile, Amy was working on the technical aspects of their plan. The Liberation Front had access to Void Dominion biotechnology captured from previous battles. Amy was learning how to modify it for human purposes. Their communication systems are based on quantum entanglement at the biological level, she explained to Danny. Each creature is connected to the hive through microscopic organisms in their bloodstream. Can we interfere with that connection? Danny asked. Better, Amy said. We can hijack it. Instead of just blocking their communications, we can send false information through their network. The plan that emerged from all this work was complex and horrible. Human forces would pose as refugees fleeing from Void Dominion attacks. When the Dominion came to consume them, they would find settlements full of people infected with Lisa's bioweapon. The virus would spread through the Dominion hive mind, breaking apart their unity and filling them with fear and confusion. At the same time, Amy's modified technology would inject false memories and conflicting orders into their communication network. The Dominion would start receiving instructions that contradicted each other, making them doubt their own leadership. The beauty of it, Jake explained to the Liberation Front leaders, is that the more they try to fix the problem, worse it gets. The evacuation ships looked desperate and broken as they limped away from New Haven Colony. Benny had done excellent work making them appear damaged, with fake hull breaches and failing engines that leaked radiation into space. To any observer, these were refugee ships carrying the last survivors of another human settlement. Jake watched from the command center as the Void Dominion fleet took the bait. 12 massive bioships, each the size of a city, moved toward the fleeing vessels like predators following wounded prey. The Dominion had consumed 47 worlds in the past month. New Haven was supposed to be number 48. Refugee. Ships are transmitting surrender signals, Amy reported from her station. The Dominion is responding. They're moving in to begin feeding. On the screens, Jake could see the evacuation ships dropping their fake shields and powering down their weapons. The people aboard those ships were not really refugees. They were volunteers, humans who had agreed to carry Lisa's bioweapon in their bloodstreams. When the Void Dominion tried to feed on them, they would get more than they bargained for. How many volunteers do we have? Rick asked, watching the Dominion ships getting closer. 8,000 on the ships, Jake said. Another 15,000. Still on the planet's surface, waiting in the shelters. The plan was simple and horrible. The Dominion always fed on space refugees first, then landed on planets to consume the remaining population. The bioweapon would activate during both phases, spreading through the Dominion hive mind like poison through water. Dominion boarding pods are launching, Amy announced. Contact in 3 minutes. Jake felt sick watching the screens, but he forced himself to keep his eyes open. These people had volunteered to die so that billions of others might live. The least he could do was witness their sacrifice. The first Dominion creature touched the first human volunteer 2 minutes and 37 seconds later. Jake could not see what happened on the refugee ship, but he could see the readings on Lisa's bioscanner. The weapon had activated. Virus is spreading, Lisa reported, her voice tight with emotion. Initial infection confirmed in 12 Dominion units. The bioweapon worked exactly as designed. The infected Dominion creatures began experiencing something their species had never known before: individual thought, personal fear, the terrifying sensation of being alone inside their own minds. For creatures that had shared every thought and feeling with their entire species since birth, the experience was devastating. The infected units began broadcasting panic and confusion through their hive connections before the virus cut them off completely. Secondary infections confirmed, Lisa said. The panic is spreading faster than the virus itself. Jake watched as the Dominion bioships began showing signs of confusion. Their perfect formations started breaking apart. Ships that had been moving in perfect coordination suddenly began drifting out of position. They're trying to understand what's happening, Amy observed. Look at their communication patterns. They're sending the same messages over and over again. The Dominion had never experienced equipment failure or crew confusion. Their technology was biological, connected directly to their hive mind. When part of the hive started malfunctioning, they did not know how to respond. Landing forces are touching down on New Haven, Rick reported. Ground phase is beginning. On the planet's surface, 23,000 Dominion creatures began their feeding process. They moved through the abandoned cities like a dark tide, searching for any remaining life. They found the underground shelters where the human volunteers were waiting. The moment the first Dominion creature touched a human in the shelters, Lisa's virus spread into the ground forces. But this time, something unexpected happened. Jake, look at this, Lisa called out, her voice excited and terrified at the same time. The ground forces are not just getting infected. They're getting Amy's false memory implants too. Amy had hidden her modified Dominion technology in the shelter systems. When the creatures tried to access the shelter computers, they absorbed the false memories and conflicting orders she had programmed. What kind of false memories? Jake asked. Orders to retreat. Reports of massive Liberation Front fleets approaching. Memories of previous defeats that never actually happened. Amy was reading the data streams from her implants. They're starting to believe they're losing a battle that isn't even happening. The effect on the Dominion forces was immediate and catastrophic. Creatures that had never experienced doubt suddenly found themselves questioning their orders. Units that had never known fear began retreating from empty buildings. But the worst part for the Dominion was the isolation. As more creatures became infected with the bioweapon, they lost their connection to the hive mind. For the first time in their species' existence, individual Dominion creatures found themselves alone with their thoughts. They're screaming, Lisa said quietly, monitoring the bio-readings. Not physically screaming, but their neural patterns show absolute terror. Jake forced himself to watch as the Dominion ground forces began falling apart. Some creatures stood frozen, unable to function without hive guidance. Others ran in random directions, driven mad by the experience of individual consciousness. The few uninfected creatures tried to help their infected comrades, but touching them only spread the virus further. Within 6 hours, the entire Dominion force on New Haven was either infected or too terrified to continue the mission. They're withdrawing, Rick reported with amazement. The bioships are pulling back. But Jake knew the real test was still coming. The Dominion fleet would return to their main force and spread both the virus and the panic to other units. The question was whether the effect would be strong enough to cripple their entire invasion force. Ben, how are our real fleets doing? Jake asked. Ben was coordinating with Liberation Front forces across 12 star systems. The plan called for traditional military strikes, while the Dominion was dealing with the chaos from the bioweapon. Better than expected, Ben reported. The Dominion forces are not responding normally to our attacks. Some ships are retreating without fighting. Others are firing on their own units. Amy pulled up tactical displays showing Dominion fleets across the sector. The infection was spreading through their ranks like wildfire. Ships that had operated in perfect coordination for millennia were now scattered and confused. Look at this pattern, Amy said, pointing to the displays. The infected ships are trying to reconnect to the hive mind, but the virus prevents it. So they're sending distress signals constantly. The uninfected ships are getting overwhelmed with panic broadcasts. Danny had been monitoring Dominion communication networks. Their command structure is falling apart, he reported. I'm seeing orders being issued and immediately contradicted. Fleet commanders are reporting victories and defeats for the same battles. The false memories were having their intended effect. Dominion forces were receiving reports of Liberation Front superweapons that did not exist. They were remembering tactical defeats that had never happened. Their perfect information network was being poisoned with lies and confusion. Sector Command is ordering a general retreat, Ed announced. All Dominion forces are pulling back to defensive positions. Jake felt a moment of satisfaction, but he knew the battle was far from over. The Dominion had trillions of creatures spread across hundreds of star systems. The infection would take time to spread to all of them. How long before they adapt? Jake asked Lisa. Unknown, she admitted. The virus is designed to be permanent, but they might find ways to work around it. And they still have billions of uninfected creatures. Rick was studying tactical reports from across the galaxy. The good news is that their expansion has stopped completely. No new worlds are being attacked. The bad news is that they're consolidating. Their remaining forces. Amy looked up from her displays with a worried expression. Jake, I'm seeing something strange in their communication patterns. The uninfected Dominion forces are starting to avoid the infected ones completely. What do? You mean? Jake asked. They're quarantining their own people, Amy explained. Any ship or unit that shows signs of infection is being abandoned by the rest of the fleet. Lisa understood the implications immediately. They're adapting faster than we expected. Instead of trying to cure the infected creatures, they're just cutting them loose. How many are they abandoning? Jake asked. Danny ran the calculations. Current estimates suggest they've lost about 30% of their total forces to infection or quarantine, but the remaining 70% are now immune to further spread of the virus. Jake felt his stomach sink. 70% of the Void Dominion forces still meant hundreds of billions of creatures capable of consuming entire star systems. And now they knew that humans were actively fighting them. They're going to come for us specifically now, Rick realized. Before, we were just another species to be consumed. Now we're the threat that needs to be eliminated first. Ben was receiving reports from Liberation Front scouts. Confirmed. Multiple Dominion fleets are changing course toward known human settlements. They're abandoning their systematic expansion and targeting us directly. Jake looked around at his team. The plan had worked better than they had hoped, but it had also painted a target on every human in the galaxy. Ben Walsh stood on the bridge of the Liberation Front flagship and watched the impossible happen. The Void Dominion home system stretched out before them, but it looked nothing like the reports had described. Instead of perfect coordination and overwhelming power, they saw chaos and fear. Millions of Dominion creatures floated in space around their homeworld, no longer connected to the hive mind that had guided them for millennia. Some drifted aimlessly, unable to function without central control. Others had gathered in small groups, tried to figure out how to communicate with each other as individuals. Reading massive biosignatures on the planet's surface, Amy reported from her station. But they're not organizing for defense. They're just ... hiding. Jake stood beside Ben, watching the screens with mixed feelings. The bioweapon had worked, better than anyone had expected. The false memories had convinced most of the remaining Dominion forces that they were losing a war that had already been decided. The psychological damage was complete and irreversible. Any resistance from the orbital defenses? Rick asked. None, Ben replied. The defense platforms are powered down. We're receiving surrender signals from 17 different locations. It had taken 3 months to reach this point. The infected Dominion creatures had spread the virus and the psychological chaos throughout their entire species. Fleet after fleet had simply stopped fighting as their crews became individuals for the first time in their existence. The few remaining uninfected Dominion forces had tried to mount a counterattack against human settlements, but they had been operating without the coordination that made them so dangerous. Liberation Front fleets, trained in human tactics, had picked them apart systematically. Take us down to the planet, Jake ordered. I want to see this for myself. The shuttle ride to the Dominion homeworld was surreal. Massive biostructures that had once housed millions of connected minds now stood empty or barely occupied. The creatures they did see moved hesitantly. Like children learning to walk. Lisa met them at the landing site with a group of Dominion creatures who had requested to speak with the humans. These beings looked exactly like the monsters that had consumed hundreds of worlds, but their behavior was completely different. They want to apologize, Lisa said quietly. They've been trying to understand what they did while they were part of the hive mind. One of the Dominion creatures stepped forward. It was tall and dark, with the same hungry appearance as all its kind, but its movements were uncertain and nervous. We remember consuming your people, it said through a translation device. But the memories feel like dreams from someone else's life. We cannot understand how we did such things. Jake studied the creature's face, trying to read its emotions. What do you want from us? We want to learn how to be individuals, the creature replied. We have never been alone with our thoughts before. We do not know how to exist without the guidance of the hive. Rick stepped forward, his hand near his weapon. And what about the billions of people you killed? What about the planets you destroyed? The creature's expression changed to something. That might have been pain. We cannot bring them back. We cannot undo what the hive made us do. But we want to try to understand why it was wrong. Danny was scanning the area with his instruments. Jake, you need to see this. The biotechnology that powered their civilization is breaking down. Without the hive mind to maintain it, everything is dying. It was true. The massive organic structures that had defined Dominion society were failing. Their ships could not function without unified mental control. Their cities were collapsing as the biological systems that sustained them lost coordination. They're helpless, Amy observed. Without the hive mind, they can't even feed themselves properly. Lisa was working with a group of Dominion scientists, or what used to be scientists when they were part of the collective. They're asking for help, she reported. They want to learn how other species survive as individuals. Jake felt the weight of what humanity had accomplished. They had not just defeated the Void Dominion. They had completely transformed them, turning a species of perfect predators into confused, frightened beings who could barely function on their own. Sir, Ben called from his communicator. We're receiving reports from across the galaxy. Dominion. Forces everywhere are surrendering or asking for assistance. The threat is over. The news should have felt like victory, but Jake found himself thinking about the price. Humanity had saved the galaxy by breaking the minds of an entire species. The Dominion creatures were not evil anymore, but they were also not really alive. In any meaningful sense, Rick was reading reports from Liberation Front fleets across Dominion space. Casualty estimates are coming in. We lost about 4 million people total. The Dominion lost their entire way of life. And what about us? Amy asked quietly. What happens to humanity now? Jake had been wondering the same thing. The galaxy was safe, but humanity's reputation was now even worse than before. They had proven that they could not just defeat enemies, but fundamentally change them in ways that some species considered worse than death. Ben brought news from the Liberation Front leaders. They want to meet with you, Jake. All the major species are sending representatives. The meeting took place on a neutral station in the center of the galaxy. Jake found himself sitting across from leaders of 47 different species, all of whom owed their survival to human methods they found horrifying. The Korthik commander spoke first. Your tactics saved us all, but they also demonstrated why your species must never be allowed to spread freely throughout the galaxy. Another leader nodded agreement. You did not just defeat the Void Dominion. You changed them into something else entirely. This power is too dangerous for any species to possess. Jake had expected this response. So what are you proposing? Restricted settlement, the alien coordinator explained. Human colonies will be established in the Outer Rim territories. You will have sovereignty over your own worlds, but your expansion will be limited. And if we refuse? Rick asked. The silence in the room was answer enough. Humanity had saved the galaxy, but the galaxy still feared them more than it trusted them. There is more, the coordinator continued. The galaxy requires assurance that human weapons like your biovirus will never be used again. Your research into psychological warfare must be monitored. Lisa looked angry. You're asking us to give up the very abilities that saved you. We are asking you to control them, the coordinator replied. In exchange, humanity will have a permanent role as the galaxy's final defense. When conventional methods fail, when extinction threatens all life, you will be called upon. Jake understood what they were offering. Humanity would become the galaxy's weapon of last resort, kept isolated until needed, but given resources and respect for their unique abilities. The Void Dominion creatures, Jake said. What happens to them? That is partially your responsibility, the coordinator replied. Your actions created their current state. Several species have volunteered to help them learn individual consciousness. But humans must lead this effort. It was fitting, Jake thought. Humanity had broken the Dominion's minds, so humanity would have to help put the pieces back together. Danny was reading the proposed treaty terms. We get 12 star systems to start with, full autonomy within our borders, and unlimited access to research facilities. In exchange for becoming the galaxy's monsters when needed, Amy added. Rick laughed bitterly. At least they're being honest about it this time. Jake thought about Earth, destroyed centuries ago. He thought about humanity scattered across the Outer Rim, forgotten and feared. Now they had a chance to build something new, even if it came with restrictions. We accept, Jake said finally. But we have conditions of our own. The negotiations took weeks, but eventually an agreement was reached. Humanity would have their own space, their own worlds, their own future. But they would also bear the responsibility of being the galaxy's final option when civilization faced extinction. Lisa established new protocols for containing dangerous human technologies. The bioweapon that had broken the Dominion was sealed away, accessible only in case of galactic emergency. Research into psychological warfare would continue, but under strict oversight. Ben began training programs to help other species understand human tactical thinking without being corrupted by it. The goal was to make the galaxy's defenses stronger, without spreading humanity's more extreme methods. Rick negotiated the establishment of human colonies in strategically important locations. These settlements would serve as early warning systems and staging areas for future crises. Amy worked with former Dominion creatures, teaching them how to use technology as individuals rather than as part of a collective. It was slow, difficult work, but gradually the former hive mind beings began to develop their own personalities and preferences. Danny designed the infrastructure for humanity's new territories. The settlements would be self-sufficient but connected, creating a network of human worlds that could respond quickly to galactic threats. Jake took on the role of humanity's representative to the Galactic Council. He would be the voice that spoke. For a species that most others preferred not to think about, the cryopods were moved to a new facility on humanity's capital world.